Yeah, put my glasses back on. Good morning, everybody. Yes, that's good. It's a great pleasure to be at a CSSA convention again. I'd forgotten how much fun they were. It's great. I can echo what Woody said about juniors, because I started when I was 12. A neighbour gave me a cactus in 1962, and I've been interested in the hobby for 55 years now. And with any hobby, you need to sort of move on. You can't keep doing the same things, so I've done different things. And my latest passion, while I'm still fit enough to do it, is to look for plants in unusual places, habitats. And my current passion is for Peru. And at this convention, I'm going to share with you a couple of talks about this wonderful country. So if I can work this, there we go. Today I'm going to talk about Matucana. Tomorrow morning I'm going to talk about the cereoids of Peru and a bit more about the country. But this talk is about probably the most interesting plants from Peru from the point of view of cultivation, because none of them get very large, they're all easy to grow, and they're all easy to flower. But it's quite a diverse genus. Some of the plants are tropical and some of the plants are alpine. So you've got suitable species for all sorts of different environments. So of course it was your great botanist heritage with Britton and Rose who first came up with the name Matucana back in the 1920s. Rose visited Peru and went to a little town just near Lima called Matucana, where he saw the plant, and as a result the genus was created in their wonderful book. The name had already been known, the genus had already been known, but as echinocactus, and the only species that was known in the 19th century was Haney. It was named after Professor Hain, who was a professor of botany at Berlin University, very active at that time in cactus explorations. In the beginning of the 20th century, a number of other species were added following the discovery of another German, Weberbauer. And that's the first picture I could find of a Matucana. It's from Watson's cactus culture. Watson was an Englishman, and that's the first engraving I could find. And here's the first description done by a German in 1850. So, after Britton and Rose had erected the genus in 1922, they designated Haney as the type species and corrected the spelling, since originally it wasn't the correct spelling of the man's name, so the name was corrected. And then Backerberg, another German, there's a theme here. The Germans have been the principal countrymen who actually have explored South America and particularly Peru. So it does make it a bit difficult for people who don't read German, because almost everything that's published is in that language. But after other species had been added, Backerberg produced his huge book, his 6-volume Decactaceae, and he invented this name Submatucana for ones that had hairy flower tubes. I have to say, populations of Matucana can have hairy flower tubes or not, even in the same population. So I think we have to say that Backerberg, as the ultimate splitter, we know all about splitting and lumping now, don't we? Yes? I'm somewhere in between. It's the safest place to be. And then your compatriot, Myron Kimnack, he wrote a very important series of articles in the American Journal about the Borsicactinae, and he included Matucana in the genus Borsicactus. So he was a lumper. So somewhere in between lies the truth. I personally prefer Matucana as a separate genus, but it's very subjective. My favourite person, I think, in all of explorations for cacti in South America is Friedrich Ritter, another German, tenacious hunter of cactus, used to walk for days on end, and a number of his plants have still never been found again because nobody else has known where to look or been willing to walk that far. But he erected another genus, which he called Matucana, for this distinct plant, Matucana oreodoxa, which has rotund bee-pollinated or possibly hummingbird-pollinated flowers instead of the zygomorphic ones. And we know all about zygomorphic now, don't we, from the dinner last night. So half my work's been done for me by the previous speakers. This is really good. I'm glad you're enjoying yourself. I had a 5-year experience producing the new Cactus Lexicon with David Hunt and Nigel Taylor. We had 35 weekend meetings at his house when we invited experts on all the genera to come and talk to us about how we should treat their favourite plants. We spent quite a lot of it in the pub as well, I might say. So, you know that I digress, but there's a beer in England called Speckled Hen. You might have heard of it. It's named after a calf, of all things. The local pub sold Speckled Hen. It was really good stuff. On one of our meetings, the pub was not selling Speckled Hen anymore, and I said to the landlady, "Why don't you sell Speckled Hen anymore?" She said, "Because the man that used to come and drink it every day has died." So I thought, oh really? Okay. Sorry about you. It won't be the last digression. Okay. Now, the only book ever published on Matucana was by a Dutchman called Rob Bregman. Very nice chap, a botanist, a specialist in seed morphology. And he broke up Matucana on the basis of seeds. Now, that's all well and good, but unfortunately, the plants have such diverse appearance that the groups don't look very natural to me. And we're awaiting a DNA study which will actually tell us, really, what the grouping should be, and I'm hoping that will be published next year. Now, Rob's book's now quite rare. It's written in English, but it now fetches quite a high price if you can find one. And I've been working on a Matucana book now for about 5 years, and I hope to finish it next year. And that will be in English, of course, the only language I speak. So I hope it'll help people to bring them up to date. Because Rob's book now, you see, it's 20 years old, and a lot has changed in the genus since then. So what is a Matucana? Well, it's characterised mainly, the way I like to characterise it, by the fruits. When the fruit ripens, and we know about fruits as well, don't we? Yes. The seeds dry out inside, and then the fruit splits vertically, and the seeds trickle out through the slits. And all Matucanas have a fruit like that. They usually have zygomorphic tubular flowers, which are said to be pollinated by hummingbirds. Now, I say said to be because I've often, it's a beautiful place, you know, Peru. I'm sitting there on a rock, surrounded by flowering Matucanas, and there's hummingbirds buzzing all around me, okay? They're visiting the lupins and goodness knows what else, completely ignore the Matucanas. I have never ever seen a hummingbird go to Matucana, nor have I ever seen a picture of one go to one. So you've got to ask the question. Everybody says, oh yes, hummingbird flowers. Are they? I don't know. No evidence that they are, other than they look like they might be. But they get pollinated by something because they're always well pollinated, so you can always find lots of fruits. Now the habitats vary quite a bit. As I said, some are alpines, like this one, or Antiocha, and it lives in it looks like moorland, doesn't it? They live up to 4,000 metres, that's about 13,000 feet. And they're used to cold. I mean, they don't mind being cold at all. If they take frost, it's not a problem. They prefer not to be cold and wet at the same time, but they're certainly hardy. And then in contrast, you've got Madisoniorum, which is the one from the lowest altitude, and that's tropical, and it lives in the warm valleys. And in Britain, we find that tends to get a bit marked in winter if we don't maintain it at 50 degrees. I'm sure here you'd have no problem at all. So, and there's everything in between.
Peyote.
Yeah? So the distribution, they occur on both sides of the Andes. The red line, this long one here, is a rough representation of the distribution of the Haney group, and that is really a coastal group. So that grows in the valleys, the coastal valleys that drain into the Pacific on the west side of Peru. There are some other species that occur there as well, but the majority of them occur to the east of the Andes. And the other three groups are almost exclusively eastern Andean. The Haney group is characterized by densely spined plants, quite variable in appearance, and because of that they've been given lots and lots of different names. And in the lexicon we erected a number of subspecies. This is Haney itself, including various synonyms from valleys, Lima area and up about as far as Huaraz, which is about 3/4 of the way up Peru. Then the subspecies Hertzogiana, which replaces it further north. And then further south there's another subspecies called Hystrix, which replaces it south of Lima. You can see that it grows in quite a damp habitat. My pictures are normally taken in spring. I go in the southern spring, which is November, of course, it's the other way around. So it's quite nice because I can avoid the dreadful English winters, which I assume most of you have managed to also do. It's damp and rather cold at home. So to arrive at spring when all the flowers, the wildflowers are blooming, and you can see that some Matucanas are just starting to flower, but Matucanas are opportunistic flowers. They flower when it rains or just after when it rains. So I can never predict from one year to the next whether they're going to be flowering or not. And you can see that in your glass house. If I soak all my Matucanas, I get a tremendous flush of flower about 3 weeks later. And the great thing with Matucanas is many of them are repeat flowering. So when I next water them all, they do it all again. So it's really good. And I think this was hinted at the other day, but you know there's something fantastic with cacti that I can't understand. And somebody, one of the speakers, hinted at this. They're very clever at synchronously flowering. Disco cactus, for instance, all my discos will flower on one night and then nothing for weeks, and then they'll do it all again. But what the mechanism is to control this synchronous flowering is a complete mystery to me. But they do it in the wild as well. So if you go to a population, it could all be in flower or not in flower, depending on just what day you're there. So there's a lot of luck in finding flowering plants. So these plants are basically flowered already, and I would say these are winter flowerers. So they're in seed now, so I'm able to collect some nice fruits and grow the wonderful seedlings. Growing them from seed is such a joy. You can see all the natural variation, and they really, really are so easy to grow from seed. Now, high in the mountains of the Sierra, the Cordillera Blanca, which is the coastal range near to Huaraz. This is about half a day's drive north of Lima, along the Pan Am. You can see it's quite like moorland. We're at an altitude, I suppose, of about 3,500 meters. That's about, let's say, 11,000 feet. And at that time, these plants were in flower. And they stand out like beacons because there's very little other vegetation. There are no trees. This is just rocks and grassland, and they really do stand out. Excuse me if I just take a sip of water. So there's the view from the habitat. That's looking down into the valley of Huaraz, and on the other side, under the clouds here, is the Cordillera Blanca, so called because it's perpetually covered in snow, and underneath there is Huarazcaran, which is the highest mountain in northern Peru. That's the Blanca. We're standing on Negra looking at Blanca. And there's the town of Huaraz. And this is a very popular tourist destination. It takes about half a day by bus or driving from Lima, and there's the mountains in the background. People come here for mountain walking. And it's a very beautiful place, very nice hotels in this particular place, and quite inexpensive. And then you can just go out, and in the Cordillera Negra again, at lower altitude, you can find more forms of Hertzogiana, which were called Yanganucensis. Then at very high altitudes, the plants that were once called Blankii grow. We're now at over 4,000 meters. The plants are big and clumping and extremely densely spined. It's the end of the flowering season. They're winter flowers. And they grow with other plants like Puya Raymondi, of course, the biggest bromeliad in the world. There are a number of populations of this plant. It takes about 40 years, I think, to get old enough to flower. And then it sends up a flower stalk, which is about 40 feet tall. And then the plant dies, but produces masses of seeds. So if you grow one of these, bear in mind it's going to get quite big. They've got one in the glasshouse at Kew. I don't know whether they realise what's going to happen one day, but anyway. The locals used to set fire to these, and of course that destroyed all the seeds. So now they're all protected, and fortunately the plants are now recovering from having all their seeds destroyed. They also grow with Oreocereus, the most northern of all the Oreos. These are also high altitude plants. They don't occur below 3,500 meters, and they occur up to 4,300 meters, amongst the highest cacti of all. The highest cactus we've ever seen was at 4,900 meters, which is about 17,000 feet. Now these plants will, in the winter, will get minus 20 centigrade, which is cold. You get a microclimate near the ground, so it isn't perhaps quite that cold, but these are absolutely bone hardy. And they hate being dry. I mean, even in my glasshouse, I water these all through the winter, even in England. Because if I don't, they don't flower. They're too dried up. And Borchesii has a lovely yellow flower, and you can see it's in fruit, so this is another winter flower. It probably flowers in August. Beautiful plants. And the two grow together. Now, we then went further north to the town of Otusco, and we managed to extend the known range of Haini hertzogiana by several hundred kilometers by finding this plant at places where people had never seen it before. It's one of the great things you can do in a country like Peru is you can actually make discoveries because so few people have actually been and looked. So there's lots still to find and lots still to do. And so to find this, a slightly different flower colour, but the plant is fundamentally the same. The second part of this is Hystrix is the southern one, which I mentioned before. I tried to go there this April to get some nice pictures to show you, but Peru had the worst floods they've had in living memory. And when I booked my flight and when I checked on the internet, there's a very useful map showing you where all the roads have been broken. Well, I would have been able to get 50 kilometers outside of Lima and that would have been it. So I cancelled my trip until they fixed the roads. Even the Pan American Highway was washed away in dozens of places, bridges destroyed, the railway from Lima up to Arroyo, a very important road and railway, was completely washed away. The place was in a shambles. Even the water supply to Lima was disrupted. And my friends out in Peru said, don't come because, you know, it's just a shambles. So I'm going to go next year and hopefully get the pictures I didn't get. So I'm sorry I can't show you habitat pictures of that other than the ones I saw on my first trip, which is scans. Comacephala, that's in the north but further inland. It tends to be pink flowered, sometimes red, also very densely spined. This plant grows up to 4 feet tall. Now, we don't normally think of Matucanas as being columnar, but they are, or this one is at least. And the flower colour varies. And near to Teobamba, the flowers are orange. And here you see some of the plants growing in amongst shrubs. And the tallest plants here were about 4 feet tall.
How long does it take to get to its first foot or half?
Well, in culture, for me, it would take perhaps 10 years to get to a foot or maybe more. In habitat, I suspect they grow quicker because it's warmer and they get plentiful supplies of rain because these are the eastern valleys and these are wetter. So they get plenty of rain here. You can see how green it is. So I think they probably grow quite quickly. Now, we've heard when we were talking about molecular studies and so on, how important hybrids might have been in the evolution of cacti. And here, you find one of the many hybrids of Matucana with other things. Here it hybridizes with S. bostoa. So on the left, you've got a Comacephala. That's about 3 feet tall. And on the right, you've got the hybrid with the local S. bostoa. I found only one hybrid. There were hundreds of both the other plants, the parents, but only one hybrid. But I've seen hybrids of Matucana in many places, often with S. bostoa. So then there's the Aurantiaca group, which is generally a high altitude group. There are a few species and forms of it. This is the tight locality, a lovely little town called San Pablo. I ought to say at this point how much I appreciate the Peruvian people looking after me so well. I go to these places and they couldn't be more helpful. I mean, I don't speak very much Spanish, but they find it all very amusing and they just help you, you know? So it's a pleasure to go to these places. Now, this was the place that Weber went to in 1911 when he found the plant in the first place. We've always puzzled about the name Aurantiaca because it suggests golden, of course, but most of the plants in culture had red flowers. And Kimnack thought that really the plants we grew perhaps weren't that, and he invented a new one called Calvescens, which is just a red flowered form of this. Now, this is the type locality that Weber said it grows at. So I moseyed up here and had a walk up here, and I found the plant. So it grows here, growing on mossy rocks like this. And here's the plant in culture. And you can see that, in fact, it does have a yellow flower with red tips. So this is a bit unusual, that the plant from the type locality has got a different coloured flower. South of Cajamarca, which is a very nice city in the north of Peru, good place for tourists to visit. That's where the Room of Gold is. You know, this is where the Spanish insisted that the Incas fill the room with gold to spare their lives. You remember? Well, the room's still there, and you can go and see it. It's in Cajamarca. There's no gold in it now, I might say. This is a form called Densispina, and it's fairly obvious why it's called Densispina. And it's one of many forms of Aurantiaca. They all tend to have red flowers if they're not at San Pablo. They're zygomorphic flowers, and they flower over a long period of time. You can normally find seeds and open flowers, so it must have a long flowering period. Then there's another plant called Corundiensis, which in the lexicon we put in with Aurantiaca, but I think it's a good species now, having studied it a bit more and seen it in habitat. Here's one of the habitats of it. Here's one of the plants. This is the biggest Matucana in diameter that I have ever seen. This plant, for instance, my stick is 4 feet long. So these are big plants, and these are the biggest Matucanas I have ever seen. Now, Aurantiaca never does this. And the flower is rather different. It has a narrow tube and very short petals. There are various forms of Aurantiaca, or have been put in as forms. You may be familiar with Poltzy. This is the one that has all the offsets. You know, when you grow it, you get loads and loads of offsets. My advice to you is to take at least some of those off. By the way, it does it in the wild. That's not just cultivation. In the wild, they're clusters as well. But I would suggest if you take those offsets off, you get the big head to grow bigger, and you get many, many more flowers, and the flowers are spectacular and large. Then there's a rather peculiar one with sort of elongated stems, which I think is the natural hybrid, called Fruticosa, and that can have yellow or red flowers. And then the one that all Matucana collectors want to own, Hastifer. Now, it's in a really remote place, and it took me a very long time to go and take that picture. It grows right on the top of a mountain. It's quite hard work to get there. I was quite lucky to find it. But it is as ugly as sin, right? It's best left where it is, yeah? So I know everybody wants the set, but really, you know, you've got to be desperate to want to put that in your greenhouse. So I don't worry too much about whether I grow that or not. It's never been known to flower in Britain anyway. There's rumours that it's flowered in Holland, but I've got to see proof. There is a picture in Bregman's book, to be fair. Maybe that is real. Now, there is diversity in this genus. So first of all, you've got Auriflora, which has these open flowers. These flowers are bee-pollinated rather than these tubular ones. And here you see a yellow-flowered one, which is particularly interesting, Weber Bowery. So Auriflora grows near the Baños del Inca, the Inca baths, hot water baths. And you see it grows in sandy soil in amongst shrubs. And it has this wide open flower. Now, this is the story of Weber Bowery. The plant was discovered by Weber Bowery and described by Vaupel. And it was described as having bright yellow flowers. And for years and years and years, nobody knew where it grew. And eventually Alfred Lau realized, he'd said it grew between Balsas, which is here, and Chachapoyas, which is here. But the modern road, which is the yellow one, here you see all this winding thing here, that's the modern tarmac highway. Everybody went along there, they couldn't find it. And the reason is that in Weberbau's day, that road wasn't there, of course, but there was a track, and I've guessed where that went. That's this red line. So Lau very cleverly followed the old track, and he found the yellow-flowered one here. So my challenge was, I've got to see this. So I parked my car up here and looked down into the valley. So, okay, so, yeah, right. So I ought to have said that the mountains in Peru are extremely steep, and exploring off the roads is often impossible and very dangerous. So if it's like that, it's not a good place to look. This is actually where the orange one flowers is found, which was common in culture because it grows next to the main road. Here, in fact, down there. And that's quite easy to walk along, actually. It doesn't look that easy. There's the Marañon River here, look. This is the Marañon Gorge, the most fantastic place in Peru. The stuff that grows in here is unbelievable. I'll show you on Sunday, tomorrow. Here's the orange one, growing on rocks. And I'd seen this, that's right next to the road. A lot have been taken now. You know, when I first went, there were hundreds of plants, and now you've got to look hard. Kanitsi, you know, KK, he collects a lot of plants and doesn't leave many. It looks like a Weingartia. This has an orange flower, okay? There has an orange flower. And there it is in culture. Very nice, easy to grow, makes big clumps, very nice. The yellow one's more difficult, not only to grow, but to find. Now, the yellow one, I now know, grows here. Yeah? Now, it doesn't look far, does it? Okay, so it's a 15-kilometre walk, yeah? And it's a 4,000-foot drop. Okay? I did it 2.5 years ago, it nearly killed me. I didn't know I'd got heart failure at the time. Maybe that's what brought it on. But anyway, I won't be going again. So we did the walk. It took 3 hours. There was a sort of a path. And there's 2 plants here. Weberbau must have gone along this path, over this col, and onto Chachapoyas. On horseback, I expect. The yellow Weberbau grows on these rocks here, and on this slope that I'm standing on grows Myriacantha, the other plant that was described from his explorations back in 1911. And from here you can look down and see how high you are above Balsas and the Rio Marañon, which is a long way below you. And here is Myriacantha growing on the slopes. You can see they've been badly burned. These plants originally were quite tall, up to 3 feet tall. The big ones have been pushed over by cattle because there wouldn't have been animals there normally, but cattle go there. And the farmers burn the fields to make new grass, and it burns the plants. And you can see that these have grown out for a year or two, but it's spoilt their appearance, really. But there's the plant, and there it is in culture. So I did eventually see it, and it meant then that I'd seen all the described plants of Matucana, so I got the set, which is good. But it didn't do, well, it didn't do me any long-term harm, but at the time I thought, what am I doing? You know? Now, near to Atusco, is the famous localities for Matucana riteri, which is one of the most beautiful Matucanas. It'll flower in culture when it's very small. It has lovely red flowers, and the flowers of Matucanas often have purple edges, and I think this is to do with guiding the pollinator. I was tempted to say guiding the hummingbird, but anyway, whatever it is, I guess that gives a sort of target for the bird, because if indeed it is a bird. So that when you grow them, they're quite variable, but some have got very distinct purple edges to the flowers.
Is there another possible pollinator?
Yes, there's loads of insects. And the flowers of Matucana, thank you for reminding me, stay open at night. Have you ever noticed that? They don't close at night, they stay open. So maybe they attract nocturnal things as well. So here's my friend Rob. If you see a Oreocereus, like that one there, and you see rocks, you think, aha, that's worth a look. And sure enough it was, because there were some huge plants of riteri here. At least I think it's riteri. So here are big plants of this and the old Oreocereus. So then one of the things, if you're looking for cacti in this part of the world, is to look for rocky outcrops. They don't grow where there's a lot of grass or where there's trees, They tend to grow in rocky outcrops. Right, this one next to this lake, and here the plants were only about 1.5 inches across, as big as they got, real miniatures, and already flowering. And you can see I photographed this plant in the rain. So the intertexture group includes Myriacantha, which we mentioned on that slope earlier, and then there's various other ones, including the so-called white-flowered one, Oreocereus, which is the other one that everybody wants to collect, because it's very rare and very localized in habitat. Intertexture is common in the Rio Marañon. It has very nice flowers. You can see it reproduces. There's dozens of seedlings in this picture. It's easy to grow, very nice flowers, either orange or sometimes red, and everything in between. It's a very easy plant to grow, flowers when it's small. Very unusually in South America, this is limestone, and it's growing on limestone. Now, limestone is really rare in South America. You very rarely see limestone. And so I was quite interested to see that it grew on that. And unfortunately, though, it's one of those days. You see there's buds and there's fruits, but no flowers. Oh, well, you know, I have to go back. Now, I've already shown you the locality of Myriacantha. There's the wonderful flower of Myriacantha. It has lovely pale pink flowers. You may know it under the name Purpureo alba or Roseo alba. It's the same thing, but Myriacantha is its oldest name. And it tends to grow on steep places. And there's 3 known populations. This is another one near Arica Pampa. And now we want to look for Celendinensis. It's a confusing name because it doesn't grow at Celendin. Doesn't grow anywhere near Celendin. It's on the road to Celendin. So it grows near this little town of, well, one of the populations near Utco, this little town here. These places are so wonderful. They're tucked away, and you go there and all the kids come out and shout, "Gringo, gringo," you know, all sorts of stuff. Which is friendly, you know. And then if we're really stuck, they go and fetch their English teacher, who then sort of gives us a bit of information about the place, which is great. Now, unfortunately, because of this habit of burning fields, the habitat when I went of Celendinensis was pretty well chewed up, really. The cacti are rarely killed unless they're small, but it does burn all the spines off, and it certainly doesn't improve their appearance. So they end up looking a bit tatty, but anyway. There you are, one of those things. It's not an exceptional plant, but since it's rare in culture, I thought I'd show it you. Now, Oreocereus grows in a very similar place. Here we are. I think this is also probably limestone. There's an example. It grows near the hacienda called Huagal. Alfred Lau found it. It was described as having white flowers, but in fact it can have white or very pale pink flowers. My plant, and that's my original plant that I bought in England in about 1972 when Lau was sending plants to Europe. So there's the locality overlooking the Rio Marañon, and that's my plant, and it flowers white. But other people have been here, collected seed, grown the plants, and some of them are a pale pink. But also there was burning here, and the plants weren't in the finest of condition. Oh, by the way, I should mention, for succulent peperomia fans, this is peperomia heaven, this part of Peru. They're everywhere, and they're really common. It's a weed, absolute weed. They all are, you know, all these windowed things. And all the new species are all there. Sorry, was that a rude thing to say about peperomia? I love them. Well, you know, they're okay. I prefer the thing next to it, which is the young seedling of Oreocereus, but anyway. But there are many of these windowed ones, and a number have been described in your journal recently by Guillermo Pino, who is a chap from Lima, very nice man, and he's described quite a lot of new species. It's interesting when I see them, because I think, well, I saw that years ago. I didn't realise that was new. I should have described it. Anyway, so they look a bit similar. Now my favourite group, this is the Porticostata group. This comes from the Rio Marañon. The Rio Marañon. It makes big clusters on earthy banks. And the Marañon is a spectacular place. Building roads, you see, is pretty tricky, really. They need to be put in the most unusual places. Here's a road here, look. Yeah? And the knack is to have a reliable vehicle and a driver that keeps his eyes on the road. Yeah? This is a really good thing. Yeah? That is an amazing road, and one of many. They just build them on vertical cliffs. Just incredible. But it's worth it, because when you go around the corner, what do you find? You find beautiful flowering Porticostata And these plants are absolutely lovely.
Potato cactus.
Yeah, it looks a bit like that, doesn't it? It's got a bloom on the body. They're slightly whitish. The flowers vary from orange to pink, short tubed to long tubed. And there's a strong spine form that was distributed as robustispina. Obvious reasons. A bit further north you find the northern form, which is very similar. It has thinner tube flowers and the plants get bigger, but it's similar. And then a plant I described for my friend. Now I ought to pay tribute to my friend Paul Huxley. He's 20 years younger than me, so he's up the mountain a bit quicker than me, but he's very tenacious at finding stuff. And he took this road, this new road, that went from Siwas, went from Siwas east, this road here, where this number 5 is. After this was a new road was built, he went along it and he found this plant growing on rock terraces. It's a big plant. It can grow up to a foot tall or more. It looks a bit like Copiapoa hazeltoniana. Golden spines, whitish body. There's Paul. He lives in Cambridge, very near me. And one day we hope to do a book about the cacti of all of Peru. He's made a really good step forward in this book. He's married a Peruvian girl. And he's got a house in Arequipa. And he promises me that very soon he'll have a lovely 4-wheel drive. So I think this is a good step forward. Well done, Paul. And there he's sitting rather self-consciously next to his plant. And there it is. And you'll hear on tomorrow, I described another plant after him that he'd found that is even more remarkable. But you see, the plants get quite large, and it's a nice plant to grow. And that's the crossing at El Chagual. This is the little village of El Chagual. Extremely hot place this is. We're going down the Marañon now, so we're getting lower and lower. And it's really, really hot there. And it's difficult to sleep because of the racket from the river right behind the hotel. I say hotel. I ought to just digress here. I went to this place when it was just bought by a very nice lady from Lima who decided she wanted to get away from it all. She picked a good place. But in the early days of building it, the toilets had no walls. So when you were sitting there, the whole street could see you, yeah? So you can just imagine the look on the people's faces. They walk down the street, they look up, and there's a gringo on a toilet, right? Now, anyway, there you go. Now, this is a type locality of Matucana tuberculata. It makes big clusters, quite tall stems, on sort of, I should say, earthy banks. There it is. And now, here it is growing with Formosa. That is Formosa. These are tuberculata. They don't seem to hybridize, but tuberculata makes quite big clusters, and it can get very tall. Further north it gets tall. You can see just how tall. That's over a foot tall. Now my favourite Matucana, people say, why is it your favourite? Well, it's easy to grow. It flowers and it's small. So Crani is my favourite plant. Formosa grows with it. This is the most cold-sensitive plant in my collection, I would say, even more cold-sensitive than Madisoniorum. And this is where it comes from Balsas, from this canyon. It takes a day to go up and back. It's a very long way because of all the zigzags. And it's a beautiful place, and it's full of cactus. And you'll see that tomorrow, all the huge Matucana and brown Ingias and Matucanas. So it's a lovely place, and Matucana formosa is common in this area. This is the type locality. I'm speeding up a bit because I'm going to get the big heave-ho if I'm not careful. I want to get to the end because the new plant's at the end, right? So Formosa minor is the small one, comes from El Chagual, further south. Very prolific. Remember, we were looking at these, and a lorry driver stopped, hung his head out, and said in Spanish, "Be careful of snakes," he said. I said, "Okay, right." It's hot here. That's why it's my favourite plant. Those are 3-year-old seedlings from one fruit that I collected. And you see how diverse the flowers are? Some are pink, some have got edges, some are broad petal, narrow petals, all from one fruit. And that's only a fraction. I mean, I got maybe 50 plants, and they all flowered on the same day. On my lawn. That's the original habitat. difficult to get around, but I found it right down by the river where it's not supposed to grow. Here's the plant right next to the river and right next to a road, so it was easy to find. And they're quite variable. Some have very long spines, others short. Easy to grow, and often growing, again, with Formosa. Now, I want to show you Marizaniorum. This plant was brought originally by Paul Hutchison and described in your journal, and the plants were very large. It's now very, very rare. Plants were collected, and they're also eaten. You see, this is a snack bar to a goat. Hardly any spines, so it can easily eat it. It's a very hot place. It only grows now on vertical, inaccessible rocks. I'd love to think there's other populations, but I've got to find them. This is the habitat of Oreocereus here. It's the only place I know it grows. It's the original Ritter location. Very few people know where it is. The plants grow very flat to the ground. It's geophytic. So I'll just move on, because I do want to show you, well, this is Pujapati. Let's just pass Pujapati, because I do want to show you, excuse me, this is one of the new ones, right? So you go down this road. You go down this road, yeah, okay? Yeah, ladders provided. And you end up looking at Matucana Klopfensteini, named after a Swiss a forester who lived here and found this lovely plant. And it was described in Kipo 2 years ago. And I'm now growing some nice seedlings, and I'm sure it'll be a nice addition to the collection. It gets quite tall, up to 3 feet tall, and eventually grows with Espostoa mirabilis. Now, we found 2 wonderful new Matucanas. We went north of Taobamba, and we found this. We called it, I described it as Oreocereus rosiflora. It has a beautiful flower. It's not zygomorphic, so it's a bee flower. Absolutely stunning flower. It grows very, very easily. It flowers in a 2.5-inch pot. And it's not cold sensitive. So what more? Look at that. That is a 6-centimeter pot, right? 2.5. That is a fantastic new plant. And I've already distributed thousands of seeds. Thousands of seeds. Because my objective in life is to make sure that everybody that wants it gets it without digging them up. Right? So grow thousands of seedlings. And the same thing applies to our other fantastic discovery. Just leaning out of the car window, one of my colleagues saw this little red, and he said, "What's that then?" These are fields the farmers piled up the rocks, yeah? And it's growing in the rocks. And look at this flower. So he got out the car, looked at it, and he said, "What the hell's that?" You know? And you can see it's high above the Rio Marañon. So I described this plant as Rebutii flora, because the flower is just like a Rebutia flower. It's fantastic, and it's twice the size of the rosiflora flower. The following year, because we only found 10 plants, we went back and we climbed up the mountain here, and we found thousands of plants. And I've not told anybody where it is. And I'm not going to either, until everybody that wants them have got seedlings. And then there'll be no purpose to go and dig them up, hopefully. But it gets big in the wild, easy to grow. It doesn't flower as small as the other, but it flowers when it's in, let's say, a 3-inch pot. So we have a great time, and there's more to do. So I hope you've enjoyed that. And thank you very much.